Hi, welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, the budget may be resolved by the state legislature, but as of this taping, not with the governor's signature. There are a ton of remaining issues that the legislature has postponed. As they say, let's get to it.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, as we're supposed to be into a new Commonwealth fiscal year, I think we mostly are. We'll see how that works out. We've had one of the most contentious budget debates in recent history. To analyze this, to get the story out, joining me is Mary Wilson from Pennsylvania Public Radio. She's a frequent guest on the program. Steve Esack, he's with the Allentown Morning Call. He covers the Capitol. And to my right, figuratively speaking, that would be to your left, is John Micek. No ideology involved here. He's the editorial page editor for the Harrisburg Patriot and PennLive. Well, before we get to the issues, you've covered a lot of these. It got a little nasty up there. No?
Yeah, thanks for bringing the longevity up. I always appreciate that. No, it was a heck of a debate on, what was it, Monday night when the House and Senate kicked out in the Senate, more so in the House. The Democrats were angry about it. There was a party line vote in the House, a little bit more narrow in the Senate with Chuck McElhaney from Bucks County crossing sides, but not a single Democratic vote, and not unexpected, frankly.
Yeah. All right, Steve, what's the bone of contention in the budget that made for all this rancor? What are the couple of issues that not a single Democrat voted for it? That's not usual. Normally the leaders, till the last couple of election cycles, the leaders in both parties would come together and get something and then go ahead.
Well, I just think it's a lack of taxes in it. I don't think the upcoming gubernatorial election really has much bearing on it, especially in the Senate. Maybe in the House with the Democrats, that's something different, but I don't think in the Senate they were pushing for it. And honestly, with all these last 3-4 years of severance tax on natural gas, I don't think the Democrats would have let the election interfere with that. The governor said he wouldn't sign a budget with tax increases for cigarettes or that severance tax without pension or liquor. Right. I interviewed Senator Dominic Pileggi in his office after
majority leader in the Senate. Go ahead.
Yeah, after the governor decided he would not sign the budget, and the senator told me that opposition among House Republicans was really what killed the severance tax, not so much the governor's quasi-ultimatum he made last week on that issue.
All right, Mary, $29.1 billion, no new taxes in the budget. There's this big debate about what even some of your colleagues in the Fourth Estate call gimmicks in it. This was not just Democrats. But the budget, is it really balanced? That's a huge question, isn't it?
Yes, that's a huge question. I think people who were passing budgets under Governor Rendell, both Republicans and Democrats, will say that the gimmicks, as you called them, that are used in this budget are not new. They were used to balance budgets under Governor Rendell. The argument Democrats are making, Democrats who did not like this budget, the argument they're making is that the volume of one-time revenue sources and rosy revenue estimates was greater this year than in years past. There are Republicans who dispute that.
Leading to a potential shortfall before the end of the fiscal year. Is that the point?
Right.
All right, John, I don't think there's been a more contentious issue than education. Even though there was something like $300 million and the block grants are there, education seemed, during the course of the debate that I watched, seemed to be at the core of the problem. Yes or no?
Yeah, if you talk to Governor Corbett and his lieutenants, they'll tell you they put in all kinds of new money for education. But Democrats got up one by one and trooped to the microphone and complained over and over again that schools were getting shortchanged. Another core part of this debate is what's going to be done to help Philadelphia schools. That's sort of still hanging out there with this question about whether or not the city can impose a $2 a pack cigarette tax that's stalled out in the House right now. That raises something like $45 million a year. In the first year, Philly Mayor Mike Nutter was stalking the hallways for 2 or 3 days straight trying to get this together. As we sit here,
and the Senate did it, right?
Yeah, the Senate kicked it out and it went over to the House, and the House you know, it's stalled over there now. And as we sit here on a Wednesday afternoon, it hasn't come together yet.
Yeah. All right, the one issue that Governor Corbett, Steve, has indicated he must have. Now, we'll have to see. As I say, as of this conversation, we don't know if he's going to sign it. I'll talk with Mary in a minute about those options. But when it comes to pensions, he has really dug in now and said, I want pension reform, a 401k style plan for new employees, or I might not put my signature on, but that looks dead for the moment. Oh, what's happened?
That's completely dead. I mean, Phil is about 15.
Not even for the moment?
Not even for the moment. It's buried in Representative Gene DiGirolamo's committee. Many people know, Representative DiGirolamo has not been a fan of Governor. He's a Republican, mind you, and he has not. Yes. He has not been a fan of the governor's policy initiatives. He has gone against the governor on Medicaid expansion. He's gone against the governor on a severance tax. I mean, DiGirolamo even put out his own budget, and then he makes a motion on the House floor, which to me was unbelievable slap against the House Majority Leader, Mike Terzai, when he did that, and then 15 Republicans joined him with the Democrats and chucking it into Gene's thing.
So the Republicans aren't together in the House. Is that what you're saying?
Oh yeah, and State Rep Mike Schlossberg he's a Democrat of Allentown. He gave me a great quote. It'll never see the light of day again.
All right, we're going to run to a break. John's leaning over here. I think he wants to add a comment, and we'll get to Mary on the governor's options. All right, we'll be back. More budget conversation, pensions, and maybe we even talk a little bit about liquor. No, we're not drinking it here, but we'll talk about whether we get privatization or not.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Welcome back. We're talking about all things state capitol with Mary Wilson from Pennsylvania Public Radio and Steve Esack from the Allentown Morning Call. And over here is John Micek, and I'm going to turn to John. John, you wanted to make a comment about the pension bill. I mean, it's gotten a lot of publicity, and Steve says it looks like how many different ways can you spell dead on arrival? Not dead on arrival, maybe dead on arrival, right? Was dead to begin with.
I mean, the motion to recommit to DiGirolamo's committee was 10796, which would tell you all you need to know about where the votes have been on this thing for 2 months. The people who are where they are going to be where they are. And Steve's right. That committee's like a black hole.
So every Democrat against it, and a dozen or so Republicans.
You got guys like Glenn Grell from Cumberland County, who's the author of a competing pension proposal, who doesn't think that this plan that the governor favors is going to get the state where it needs to go. I mean, there's not even unanimity within the Republican caucus on this. Okay.
All right, Mary, as we talk now, we've got this situation where the governor faces really three options, right? He could sign it, the budget. He could let it become law without his signature, or God forbid, he could veto parts of it and call the legislature back. He could veto the whole thing, all of it, parts of it, line item it. Am I right?
Yeah.
And what's the latest word? Do we know? He's reviewing it, right?
I tell you, I can give you like 10 quotes, coy answers to that very question from the governor's spokesman, because the governor is not making himself available to reporters right now. Spokesman being very coy about what the governor is doing. He's deliberating over the budget. He's reviewing it line by line. Of course, a very strong hint there that he might consider crossing out someone's funding, maybe the legislature's.
Well, they still have that fund with, what, 140 million, 160 million, which is why they won't give up. The legislature, by the way, has hold of its own account, which means it doesn't end at the end of a fiscal year. One governor in the past actually struck that line out, forcing the legislature to do what he wanted them to do. But you don't, I mean, that's really, go ahead, Mary, finish your point. Absolutely.
What I think is so interesting about the governor's insistence on the pension bill is that, nothing about the bill itself has changed. And the persuasion campaign has continued, and the governor's insistence has grown even more deep. He's dug in even more. But the bill hasn't changed, so the major criticisms haven't changed. He hasn't tried to make a deal that can work with Democrats who think he might be out of office in the fall or come January.
And the pension bill, there's a debate over whether it saves money in the short run and the long run. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say there's actually two pension debates here. You have Representative Mike Tobosh's bill that we're talking about now that would split the pay, $50,000 in the up to $50,000 in the guaranteed
benefit plan up to $50,000 for new employees, and then they'd go to define a 401k, right?
But the other aspect of what the governor wants to do is he wants to reduce the state and school districts' pension payments for this fiscal year that we're now in. That would free up money for the state to spend and school districts to spend in other programs. It's extremely hard for conservative Republicans to do that, who got elected in 2010 on pay down the debt, pay down the debt, pay down the debt. And then you also have threats from Moody's and S&P and all those other things that are saying pay down the debt or at least give us a firm commitment that you will continue to pay down the debt, or we're going to change your credit rating, which would increase the state's borrowing costs. So it's like a two-tiered thing, and no Democrat wants to do that. They did it before for...
Go ahead.
Yeah, and if you talk to Democrats, they tell you that there's no upfront savings in the coming fiscal year in the Tobash bill as well. So that's part of that there. And you talk to Glenn Grell about this. He complains the Tobash bill also doesn't provide for paying down any of that long-term unfunded liability.
Not enough.
Not enough. Yeah. So there's just multiple threats here. And the other thing is, Mary made a great point though. And the governor the bill has remained the same, but to watch the governor pivot and try to make these different arguments over the last week or two to try to get people on side. It started off with the credit rating argument when he came down to the Capitol press room the other week. On Sunday night, he tried to roll it into property tax reform, saying districts are going to face this massive increase if nothing is done. So he's pivoted and tried to win over with various arguments, but the fundamentals of the bill, you're right, Mayor, haven't changed.
To get the other plan out, the plan the Democrats would like is just to borrow money and pay lower interest rates, as I understand it, pay the pension debt off, and let the reforms that were enacted 4 or 5 years ago play out, right? And that, in effect, would solve the problem long term.
But you have the, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, but you have the Society of Actuaries and an independent group saying these pension obligation bonds, that sort of thing, don't go there. They are too volatile. They could wreck your finances.
So bottom line, before we're going to run to a break, I want to come back and talk about liquor privatization, some other things. Pension reform going nowhere.
Right.
No, going nowhere. No, none of you think it has a prayer of getting out of the committee, and so could end up into next year with no pension reform. And
well, there's also a key fundamental thing is pensions aren't sexy in the political world, you know.
Well, that's true. It doesn't poll. You're right.
Taxpayers is confusing.
We're going to run to a break. We're going to talk about liquor privatization and a couple other issues, and we'll do that after this break.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania, and by the Pennsylvania Coal Alliance, representing companies involved in America's most affordable, reliable energy source. To learn more, visit pacoalalliance.com.
Welcome back, Journalist Roundtable, on a variety of things, all things state capital and some aspect, more than some aspects of the budget. Okay, the other big liquor privatization, yes or no? Is
What
that
liquor
going?
privatization?
Okay, I got it. Yeah,
I'm sorry, is that happening?
No, it's not. All right, let's go, John, to the political implications of this. Does Governor Corbett need some of these big victories to take to the voters? It looks like it's just treading water. And, you know, past incumbents have gotten things. They've been able to go, and whether Republicans or Democrats accomplished A, B, and C. Where does this go?
Well, I mean, apart from, he's got the transportation funding package,
And that's important.
which is big.
Very important.
Which is big.
Exactly.
But, okay, so, but does the average voter care that you got 4 years on-time budgets? No, unless unless your constituency, like, that got its funding cut, so.
Right.
No, and, the no tax increase thing, that's not bad, but it's a pretty narrow quiver, really.
Yeah. Same question to you. Is there any? It's hard to find an upside in all of this, I think, right now. The governor needed pensions and/or liquor to go to the voters, at least in my humble judgment.
I mean, when the Senate goes home, that's kind of says.
Yeah. By the way, the Senate is going out until September 15th, unless they have to come back to do something.
And
cleanup time.
Yeah, what is the governor's out except vetoing it, getting them back, or calling a special session on pensions, which is going to do what? I don't know.
Most special sessions do not get much done. Well, Mary, we started this with you, and before we segue to another topic, why not just veto it and say you come back and hold their feet to the fire? Now there will be, how many different ways can you spell angry, right?
Right.
Yeah, I don't know why not veto. I think there were a lot of Republicans, at least, who thought if you're going to make a threat, at least tell us what you're threatening. To say you're going to deliberate for the full 10 days whether or not you're going to approve the budget we sent you, that doesn't scare us yet.
Right.
So either go big or go home. What I think is interesting about this whole
well, they went home, right? And they didn't go. Go ahead.
What I think is interesting about this is that I wasn't sure it was possible for the governor's stock to go down with the legislature.
Yeah.
And with this move, it has. He didn't have much stock with Democrats, at least politically to begin with, but Republicans. I was walking around the halls the night we found out he wasn't going to sign it. June 30th.
And lawmakers were apoplectic.
What? The next day. It seemed insulting. It didn't seem like a clear move. What's the tactic there? All the points that you were making with Steve.
The key thing, they're not afraid of him. I mean, that's the one thing. This is supposed to be the titular head of the party. They're not afraid of him. I mean, if the governor dared him, and they called him, and then they pretty much body slammed him by exiling the pension bill to committee.
At this point,
All right, we're going to run to a break. When we come back, a big news story this week. Kathleen Kane rebuked by the District Attorneys Association. That's the Attorney General. That's unprecedented. We're going to weigh in. We'll have the reporters weigh in on that after this.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Business Council and by the Pennsylvania Business Council Education Foundation.
Hi, welcome back. Well, big news, Steve Esack. I'm going to turn to you first. Big news, the District Attorneys Association in this state actually rebuked Attorney General Kathleen Kane, unprecedented. What's at the heart of that?
I believe that the heart of that is what a lot of district attorneys across Pennsylvania believe. It was Kathleen Kane politicizing too much, the Sandusky investigation, and particularly going after seemingly personal attacks against the prosecutors who put Sandusky away for life, particularly Frank Fina, who now works for Philadelphia District Attorney Seth Williams.
Is there a little bit of politics involved? I mean, I'm trying to figure out whether it's Democrat or Republican, but you've got the DA's Association, 67 counties, but the executive committee has more of the association, which did it more Republicans than Democrats, but there are 3 Democrats. I mean, you know, what's your sense about that?
No, I mean, this is pretty stunning. I mean, this is your professional organization saying, giving you an F. And I mean, the op-ed that's in the Inquirer was co-authored in part by Dave Freed of Cumberland County, who was her opponent in the general, but also Risa Furman from Montgomery County, a fellow Democrat who is very well respected in the prosecutorial community.
I think she's a Republican.
Go ahead. And does this go anywhere, do you think? I mean, you've covered, you know, we had the sting operation, you know, all of a sudden, the backtracking on the Sandusky report about the 2 witnesses that we've talked about before. Does anybody have a clue where all this goes? I mean, is this just nothing happens? It can't help relationships between the Attorney General's office and all these district attorneys? Go ahead, Mary.
She had to have bucked a network of mostly Republican district attorneys in order to get elected to her office, right? So she already bucked that system once. I don't know that it matters that, you know, the Democrats that are in that network are now also very skeptical of what she says. I don't know that matters. Not for a couple of years, it doesn't matter, at least, you know, for her reelection.
Yeah, that's true. While we're weighing this, we have to remember, but I'll tell you, a lot of controversies for an attorney general who's been in office a year and a half.
That's true.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you know, she came into office. I think she made some decisions that gave her positive press. She closed this like Florida loophole involving the guns.
And the gay marriage decision was very popular, not the prosecutor.
Well, I mean, it depends on who you ask. Some former prosecutors and state attorney generals here said, you know, whoa, she overstepped the line. Only
popular
the courts,
with the voters, however.
Yeah,
but I get it. So you think, John, this is that stepping on toes of enough people was at the heart of it, particularly, as Steve points out, prosecutors, law enforcement officials that her office worked closely with?
Yeah, I mean, it's part of the club, isn't it? And then she went after some respected prosecutors, and there's some bruised egos there. You know, it comes on top of a couple of bad weeks for her. You know, whether or not it's going to amount to anything a year and a half down the line, we'll see. But you know, it's not fun.
All right, thanks. Great update. We'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And as always, stay well.